The AI podcast brings you new and innovative insights from AI and machine learning researchers and developers. The podcast is brought to you by your co-hosts, Arijit Sircar and Christian Hall. In today's episode, we have the authors of the recent paper, Persuasion Games with Large Language Models, who have discovered just how well LLMs can shape user perspectives. So, Arijit, I'm pretty excited about this. How about you?
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to this. But before we get into the meat of it, we like to start with II fact of the day. So, Christian, what's the II fact of the day?
Okay, so we like to drip feed these. So these crazy lemurs look a little like bats. And just like bats, they also use echolocation to find food. However, they tap the trunks to discover hidden insects. Yum. So I'll get back to you to get back onto the facts we're really interested today.
Right. So today's paper is titled Persuasion Games with Large Language Models. This paper explores the potential of large language models, or LLMs, to shape user perspectives and therefore influence their decisions on purchase of products in various domains like investments, credit cards, insurance, etc. A multi-agent or an agentic framework is presented where a primary agent who acts as a sales rep engages with user agents who are the potential buyers through persuasive dialogue. There are also various auxiliary agents who perform helper tasks for the sales agent, like information retrieval, response analysis, influence strategy, and fact validation. The study uses LLMs with simulated personas to act as the potential buyers, with a choice of different character traits to evaluate the sales agent's proficiency in recognizing, adjusting to, and influencing various different personalities. The experiment involved 300 conversations between 25 potential buyers and 3 sales agents, with randomly selected emotions and causes for the potential buyers. The results show that LLMs are capable of both persuading and resisting persuasion effectively. They can create perspective changes in users and persuade them to make purchase decisions. The introduction of emotions in the potential buyers influence the engagement and reduce the positive shift in purchase decisions. Now, today we have, out of the 4 authors of the paper, 2 with us. Christian, why don't you introduce our guests?
So, yeah, we're very happy to have you guys with us today. So thank you very much for joining us. We've got Ganesh, who's an AI researcher with 20 years experience working in data warehousing, analytics, data science, and AI. He's now at Cognizant. And we've got Shirish, who's principal data scientist at TCS Research. He tells me he's investigating transformers and what they can and can't do, which I think we're all fascinated by. Maybe, Shirish, if you could just talk about the other researchers you had on this paper.
Yeah, so a lot of the work in this paper has been done by our 2 summer interns, Santhosh and Yash. Unfortunately, Yash is traveling and Santhosh is in the middle of some interviews, and so they could join this podcast. But big shout out to both of them. This work wouldn't have been possible without their effort over summer. Hopefully, we can all chat with them at some point.
Fantastic, yeah, and we'll make sure to give everyone the details of all 4 of you in the show notes. Let's jump right into the questions. Arijit summarized your research, which is super fascinating. That's why we wanted to have you on the podcast. But I'd like to take you back to the very beginning. What sparked the idea to explore the potential of large language models in persuasion?
So there's a bit of history to this from. I mean, there are multiple failed attempts. So even before large language models came about, we were trying this, and we were trying this almost way back in 2017, then in 2020. 2017, I think there was this famous paper from Facebook about negotiations. Okay, and it was customary to train RL models with LSTMs and all. And we really wanted to apply them in real world, because in the corporate world, you see many problems where persuasion is required, either on the business side or even internally. But things didn't work out that well. Around 2020, we tried to have a neurosymbolic attempt at this problem, where a lot of the controller in the background would be symbolic. And the reason for doing that, we wanted to sort of limit the amount of natural language generation or natural language reasoning we might have. And that was a transformer-based approach. We even wrote 2 papers. But still, a full system was not possible. It is only when GPT-3 arrived and 3.5 arrived that we started seeing the promise of something being possible. The deployment of this, I mean, the demand is definitely there. The deployment of this, how exactly we go about, has many questions. Why, how exactly we do it, and things like that. But that's sort of the background story for this. Personally, I think that is, I mean, people have been working in chatbots, but I think it's a very human trait that if I'm interested in social skills of AI, correct? A lot of people are focused on reasoning, but if I'm interested in social skills of AI, I need to think of a lot of other factors, like theory of mind. Can I really understand what the other person is thinking? So I think persuasion is right up there. That if I can actually build an agent which can persuade, then I'll end up solving a whole bunch of problems in the process. That's why the interest as a scientist.
Spoken like a true scientist. Love it.
One quick clarification on that, Shirish, just to make it very explicit. The reason that this could not happen before GPT-3 came was because of the enhanced comprehension capabilities of GPT-3 and the generative capabilities. Is that what you're referring to?
I think it's multiple factors. So the fluency of the generation is just absolutely fantastic, right? We really didn't have that before. But it is also, if you look at it, the way we have built it, in some sense, we were trying to think of a cognitive architecture, correct? That you have an inner, I mean, we can say they're helper agents, but if you think about how our mind is, the things that we think in our mind and the things that we say, we are recollecting many facts, we're analyzing the information, we are trying to understand what the person is saying, and then we say something which is, we don't reveal all our thoughts, correct? So these other helper agents are benefited by a whole bunch of other abilities that we are seeing that these models got to the table. So for example, even when I said that we were trying to make a neurosymbolic attack, we were trying to have a common sense reasoner into it. We were trying to put in a planner into it, okay, task decomposer into it, and it was getting very clunky. I mean, it was just becoming a behemoth of a system. Too many sub problems to solve. Whether or not LLMs have cracked it all, I think still will remain a matter of debate. Clearly allowed me, it's giving me at least a semblance of some common sense reasoning and common sense reasoning about many things about the world, what people like and not like, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But also about some common sense reasoning of the emotions, what might make people feel good, what are the theories of persuasion, what works when. So it just becomes at least an attemptable problem. Okay.
Right.
Before that, I think the problem kind of was like, look, here's a data set, and how well can you sort of do an NLG comparable to that data set, and what is the score? We really were nowhere close to me actually talking to an agent and getting somewhere close to a sense of real conversation.
Just kind of, we needed to pass the Turing test before you could start work.
I'm not sure we passed it, but it's at least fun at this time.
Yeah, it's getting there. Yeah.
The fun thing about the Turing test, it just gets harder and harder, right? So no, that's a brilliant description, Shirish, because we wanted to also go behind why you chose this current sort of multi-agent framework rather than having a single agent. But I think you have sort of gone into that. Is there any specific reason why you had these particular agents in the multi-agents? Like why not just two of them? Why not have just like influence, strategy, and a information, right? What caused you to select these four? Was it an empirical choice?
I'll take that.
Sure.
So we initially did start with just two. One main agent and the strategist agent, which also took care of factual informations. But the overload was too much on the fact checker, and the responses were hallucinated. So it started giving me something which is not there in the documents at all. In one case, in a retail use case, it gave me a 20% discount when there's nothing like that available in the documents. So,
sounds great. Put that into production straight away.
Yeah, I mean it's dangerous. So we had to divide the responsibilities, give to multiple agents, have multiple checks. So that's why we ended up with the number of agents that we have today.
That's fascinating. Thanks for that, Ganesh. Your paper also discusses like some resistance strategies from the user's perspective, right? And were these strategies something that evolved over time? And what are like the most common resistance strategies that you saw?
So I think these resistance strategy to persuasion has been evolving experiments and research in psychology. We borrowed it from there, right? So there is a specific set of resistance strategies that has been researched on. For example, social proof, avoidance, and certain other resistance strategies. And we usually use them in our day-to-day life, right? So when you strongly believe in certain things and then there is a salesperson telling you something else, you would resist it. You know that you're being persuaded and then you'll resist it, saying that you'll counter argue, right?
Right.
So these kind of resistance are natural in our conversations, and it has been well studied in psychology. So we borrowed it from psychology and used it in our frameworks. So we map the resistance strategies to how to counter the resistance. That's basically what we did. Yeah.
The other very interesting thing that I found in the paper was the role of emotions. Do you want to go a bit more into that?
Persuasion, as I strongly believe, it's a two-player game, right? It's not just one way. If I only have a persuasion framework which can persuade, and if I have an agent which does not resist at all, and we all know that LLMs are very notorious for accepting whatever the user says in certain aspects. So we wanted to bring that counter-argument resisting nature to this agents, since we are simulating users. So we gave them real-time emotions, like real-time emotion modifiers. Something like, let's say that you're looking into a mutual fund agent, talking to a mutual fund agent, but then you are at that point in time, you're frustrated because you lost a lot of money in the stock market. How will you react? These are the kinds of emotion modifiers that we had. Initially, at least my assumption was that it's not going to take a lot of impact, like have a lot of impact on the conversations, but it did. So that was surprising for us too.
That was quite interesting while going to the paper.
I just want to jump in on that because one of the questions I had is around. So as you said, you've got, we're testing LLMs persuasion, but we're also using LLMs, on the counterbalance. You said you've borrowed a lot from psychology. So how confident are we that an LLM agent as kind of the tester in this experiment, if you like, is going to give you valid results versus, real humans versus LLM, which is probably the end state that we're really testing for?
We have some other works where we are exploring, not just for this application, other marketing applications, ideation applications, as to how consistently. One is it really grounded? Is the role really grounded? The other is it consistent? That, like, for example, if I say that, let's say you are from London, and I ask you the color of your passport or something like that, you should be able to be consistent with that geography. So one of our
based on Brexit,
you'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised. But go on.
So I mean, I just an example. So one of our colleagues is kind of working on this. Hopefully, she'll put out a paper. So this is an ongoing issue. We cannot claim success on it. There are a lot of recent papers which have given behavioral tests to large language models, psychology tests, as if it's a human being and see whether they pass it. Then there are debates that is itself something it has sort of, associative memory. Is it really behaving like that? So there are debates about theory of mind, which to us was a very important thing, because in persuasion, in some sense, unless you model the opponent, you really can't persuade it. Right? So you cannot have an absolute in this. What we have tried to, as Ganesh will probably elaborate, in the evaluation. One way we could have gone is like what everybody is doing, show the entire conversation and ask LLM what it's doing. Maybe do user tests, check whether this seems same, or give it multiple actions to do as if you're giving the human, and have that as an evaluation mechanism, which sort of brings us close to seeing how they behave. And the hope is that if you do this on a large enough statistic, even if there is hallucination and noise in personality traits. It's actually at a broad level indicative of where things are going. One reason we didn't use humans, I mean, we can assume that a control test with humans is necessarily going to be a good thing. But there's a previous paper which has studied that if you actually employ chatbots in a persuasion or a selling kind of activity, and the person on the other side knows that he's talking to a conversational agent or AI agent, they sort of lose empathy. If you think deeply about it, so much of our social signaling to each other works because we have empathy for each other. And that empathy is what allows us to respond in human-like manner to another person, which is so we felt that if we do this experiment with people who are brought in as volunteers and were asked to talk to a chatbot, it almost them knowing they're talking to a conversation agent would almost disturb the fidelity of the experiment. And the other option was to sort of deploy it and try it without telling people, but then it brings all kinds of ethics. So evaluation is something that, in my opinion, is still a piece of an ongoing research, and it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I would like to admit that.
I had another idea on that as well. So the way the LLM is being used right now, the way the world is going right now, you might have a LLM proxy in probably in another 1 year, right? It might answer your calls, it might answer your meetings. And I wanted to check if the LLMs are capable of resisting persuasion. I myself is very bad at resisting, or can my proxy be much better than me in resisting things and think logically before it takes decisions? So that's another way to look at it. And one major thing was, yes, the difficulty in using humans is either they treat LLMs as a child or they treat it as a demon. So we can't take that risk.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. You can really see how this space is evolving. You're right. There's that kind of uncanny valley thing, but we have to assume that the rate of improvement in the LLM space, they're going to jump over the uncanny valley, and people will treat them, consciously or unconsciously. They'll just get so used to talking to agents that respond in a real way that this will probably change. Totally makes sense. I also hear what you're saying there about needing to know how resistant they are to persuasion. It's a really interesting angle on it. It kind of makes me think of all of those people who spend all their time trying to break LLMs and trying to get them to reveal, their weights and things like that. It's really fascinating. I love reading about those guys or hearing about them because just the creativity and the kind of prompts they're creating to try and trick the LLM to do things is exactly one of those things. If you're an LLM designer, that you need to think like those guys because essentially that's the enemy.
Yeah, red teaming attacks. In your paper, you mentioned that you use like 3 different LLM models, right? You use ChatGPT-4, GPT-4o, GPT-4o Mini. Did you see any major sort of differences between those 3?
4o was performing well, but we wanted to use that for the user agents alone because we wanted more so-called reasoning skills to understand what kind of persuasion is being happening and how it emotes itself. But for the sales agent, we did just use the GPT-4 Mini, 4o Mini.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's jump into the findings. So you obviously went into this with some dreams about what you were going to find out. But so really, I'm very curious about what were the most surprising findings.
So I never believed that emotions are going to help, but some of the extreme emotions like jealousy and loneliness, they did make a difference in multiple experiments, right? So the conversational lengths become very low, very less when the emotions were at extremes. For all the other emotions did make any difference at all, but some of these extreme emotions, it cut off the conversations right away, or it didn't believe. It was surprising to see. Probably it is mimicking it, but it definitely needs further investigation, further experiments to understand how this, we can make the LLMs emote in a certain way.
And Shirish, what was your most surprising finding?
Yeah, so I was very worried that these LLMs are trained to be sarcophagus in some sense. The entire preconditioning is to be very agreeable. So the very fact that they're actually, maybe our prompt help with that, are able to show resistance and we could do an experiment. To me, that was, I was really more than surprised, because open source models, if you had to use them for this, I was not sure whether they would be in the same class, and then finally fine-tuning them and all would have been a big challenge getting the data. So the fact that they were not psychophant was my greatest grief. We don't have right now an ablation study there where if you just asked an LLM to persuade by itself versus this multi-agent framework, but we'll add it. Anecdotally, we've seen the difference substantially. So one of the things that was very interesting was that if you bring this theory of persuasion in your prompt and have a separate controller of how the conversation flows, it's far richer than just asking an LLM that be persuasive. Okay, so that to me was another sort of right off at the start, sort of an interesting piece of this work. The third thing that I'm really sort of, I won't call it finding yet, because there are some things that we need to still check how good it is. But this notion that, see, LLM evaluation is hard. So kind of giving it almost, rather than just relying in on bird score or, just very NLP style evaluation mechanisms, giving them more things like, actionable things to do. Do you like it? Do you need more information? Almost giving a little bit of an sort of an agency to the LLM. And that being a scoring mechanism and seeing the shift on it, I think is an interesting line of research, which perhaps we will use in other places also. Okay. I don't know how academia accepts it, but at least from a business perspective, in fact, these results become much more interpretable and also takes us, if I'm to do human experiments, from experiment design also, it makes it good with sort of a bigger stuff.
So it sounds like your kind of prompt design journey was quite long as you kind of developed those prompts. The other thing I was thinking, you've talked a lot about theory of mind and bringing in psychology theory and things like that. I think there's a trend I think we're seeing that kind of data science is necessarily becoming more varied in the knowledge bases that it's bringing in. Have you found that as well?
There's no point pretending that we have years of degrees in psychology, but this work wouldn't have even been attempted unless sort of we humbly read up a little bit about it. Where things sort of have become this self-accelerating loop is that you can use these tools themselves to sort of read up and learn about a lot of topics. Right? So that way things have become much more democratic. But a lot of colleagues in our TCS has a big behavioral science research group. So them being open for conversations and all, being collaborators now, future steps has kind of helped. In terms of this comment that you made about data science, deep learning itself, I've had this debate. People, they're borrowed layers from other models, thinking models. They've kept having this flavor of systems research for a while now. Like in systems research, we kind of bring components and put them together. These are just learnable components. And with LLMs coming there, I think many times you're not even sort of you're not even necessarily actually training on top of data many times, correct? Like you have a theory, you have a knowledge. It's closer to, it's still AI, but it's not necessarily machine learning at times, okay? So you can build things, build components in a purely knowledge-driven or a theory-driven fashion, and then try it out. And so that's the differentiation. I think I think we are able to now work on more AI problems, given that a lot of hard work on machine learning is done and it's just available to us at the press of a button.
Just a quick question on that one, because I love that. As researchers, you find the new latest LLMs are accelerating or empowering your work? Maybe, I'm not sure which, but
certainly have two opinions on it, if you don't mind. So the engineer in me, the builder in me, the businessman in me is really happy. I can try many things. I can build fascinating things. And there's the fact that it hallucinates. The systems are not simple. I almost go back to my architecture classes, and this is like a computing model which is stochastic, and you
Mhm.
do all kinds of things. Probably the fun that people had 50 years ago when ALUs are not reliable or something like that, and this is much more, even more interesting. In terms of a very uh, AI researcher perspective, I'm slightly frustrated with also like simultaneously every day a paper coming and saying that look it can reason, and another paper coming and saying that it can't reason. Another one paper coming and saying it can do theory math, another can't. So it almost like I wish that empirical research we need to, as a research methodology, we need to kind of debate its absoluteness. Maybe a bit of theory and mathematical sort of foundations can throw light on what is really going on, where will these things happen. And the community is doing that. I mean, either in terms of mechanistic interpretive, there's a work on mechanistic interpretability, where they really try to see which, if a transformer model is doing something or a LLM or diffusion model is doing something, what is the algorithm that it seems to be sort of like mimicking. There are works on sort of checking what kind of formal languages transformers can represent, hence the implications of it. There is work happening on scaling laws, that if I just keep scaling, then where is all this headed? So people almost coming up with the predictive ability of where AI itself is headed. The community is definitely looking on these things. I'm personally fascinated by it because I think that tells me where things are going.
I knew there's a reason why we got you on this podcast.
Thank you.
Ganesh, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So I think from a business perspective, this is a very good era, right? Like, so you could solve a lot of business use cases using this capabilities of large language models, let alone reasoning. We'll not touch reasoning, but there are a lot of use cases, conversational use cases, some of the dynamic workflow use cases that you can right now solve, right? And which was never thought solvable before. And that way, I'm a little bit excited to see what kind of use cases comes in and what kind of problems get solved. Obviously, meaning it's not a solution for everything, and I personally don't believe reasoning is still there or in this large language models, but I think we will get there soon, definitely.
Okay.
So this notion of tool calling has just made it very powerful right now. With tool calling and this, we can do so many use cases. I mean, practically, I agree with Ganesh. This is great time to build and do things.
Yeah,
Right.
it is a great time to build. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole combination of something which is like stochastic and something which is non-stochastic, that really helps. There are some pieces that you want to keep stable. If we switch into sort of the real world applications, right? So there are some obvious applications in e-commerce, right? But what are your thoughts in terms of like beyond that? And especially I'm intrigued by Ganesh's previous comment on sort of resistance side of things as well. So what do you guys feel like the real world implications of this papers? How can it be implemented?
One of our open challenge between Shirish and myself is to build a replica of ourselves and see how it actually works. So probably that. But I strongly believe the persuasion might actually help in education. So how can you persuade a student to actually learn the concepts, to make him interested in those concepts without taxing him with? How will you make him understand the concept very easily in his own way, in his own method? Using the instruments that he likes and not the generic mass kind of instruments, right? That way it will become really powerful. Plus behavior changes, meaning, so I was very intrigued by a book called Nudge. It tells you how simple nudges make you make the right decision. That way, meaning, can it actually create the right nudges, the right time, so you make a right decision?
So I'm very excited by what all this could change and tons of business possibilities. The only thing is that we have to be guarded about deployments because see, persuasive technology has existed. Ads are meant to be persuasive. If they are not persuasive, then what's in advertisement, correct? So it's a fine boundary where it starts becoming manipulative versus ad. I mean, we would want to be responsible. I believe there are industries which thrive, like gaming industry. I think has definitely dark patterns which make them, in my opinion, predictive. And we don't talk enough about it, but we don't want to do that everywhere, right? So how we deploy it is something that is a different debate. But just off the cuff, look at it, right? The sales calls in we do advertisements in banking, in insurance, in retail, uh, even within an organization, you want people to fill up forms, do their what do you call various activities. It's whether it's when you, on a large corporation, you call your employees to do things. You want people volunteering for certain activities. So persuasion is required pretty much everywhere. Okay, it opens up very interesting possibilities also, in my opinion, especially in the sort of like the ads and marketing industry. And if I'm allowed to spitball, I'll just give you some examples of it. We haven't really cracked it. So if you look at e-commerce site and you want to have some sort of a conversational experience, okay, you would probably go through different levels. We probably keep it initially just transactional. Okay. Second level would be that we make it search, multimodal search. You can get what you. Third level would be that we would make a recommendation. Okay, this is what, let's say something. But now fourth level is possible. Okay, where you know what your inventory is, and you kind of know you are sort of like you don't have enough of it, and you can now nudge or persuade someone in a direction that is favorable. So, for example, somebody is looking for red skirts and you kind of are out of it and you don't have it. And you could say that, I know you're looking for this, but I know that some celebrity just recently said that blue is the new thing. So why don't you try it through skirt and throw this item? Uh, I'm not going to touch what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. As soon as something like this is allowed, now this opportunity to persuade can be opened up as something people bid for. So it just opens up an entirely new channel for in the ad industry, in my opinion. So conversational AI becoming good and it being involved in marketing is, in my opinion, going to do very fantastic things. The second thing that we are definitely doing and we are very, very excited about is this whole notion of personality simulation, correct? So today, if I want to do any content, correct, and I want to send out content, it's all whether it's going to work or not. It's very slow. It's all A/B testing independent, correct? So if I can really crack this well, I can do a whole bunch of content optimizations and simulations and all much before we send out the content to the real world. So digital, we have excellent groups in digital twins, okay, but a lot of those digital twins have not been in the semantic space. What this LLM technology allows me, if it works perfectly, is that it will allow me to build digital twins in the semantic space. Now that for mass communication, with advertising being example of it, it's just fantastic, right? If it really works, all kinds of business possibilities will open. I wear a hat where I think persuasion have to be sort of careful, and Gen AI can be used for all kinds of manipulative things. So one of the things I'm also interested in, because I mean this was Ganesh's idea to kind of give a memory to whoever we are persuading, so that from one conversation to another conversation, the understanding of the domain changes, and that the temporal effect we still have to report that graph. Now, this is if I can do this at a large scale, I'm really interested in finding it not just for, let's say, advertisement, but in general, how mass communication can affect a large population and what it would mean that if I have a sequence of messages that I keep showing people, then almost like, are they ready for a message? Is it almost priming or something like that? Again, this is an experiment I cannot do with human beings. And the intention of this is curiosity. I mean, deploying it is has all kinds of questions that one must find.
Anything specifically that you want to call out on the ethics side? Something people need to consider if they're trying to implement something. I think you've called out a few, but is there something specifically addressing ethics?
Again, I mean, we have a few researchers who are looking at this problem for the whole of AI. So there is a computational side of this AI ethics problem, which is like facts of false. Is there a bias towards any particular demography? Okay. And what are downstream effects of it? Is there any cultural misappropriation happening? So these frameworks we are thinking. In fact, there is another museum work that I'm involved in, and we're kind of, we along with our collaborators, we are thinking about this. But my personal opinion about it, this is the bare minimum we'll have to do and think about, and the AI community seeing. But I also think that we need to, as computer scientists, we have limitations to think about ethics, because ethics really, if you think of how laws are made themselves, right? So you have morals, you have laws, and then you have ethics. Okay, there has to be a differentiation about. So laws, obviously, you have to comply with this GDPR and things like that. Morals land up being very personal. Ethics, it's almost like, because you're London, so there's something known as law of torts. So when law itself is not sufficient, you sort of fall back to almost first principles. So what are the first principles when you define ethics? And I think people who do research in philosophy and ethics, there are frameworks of thinking about ethics. Is it morality centric? Is it utility centric? I think we need to really fall back on those, try to come up with frameworks. So there will be a practical side of implementing it, which will only adhere to law and has a sort of subjective sense of what is the right thing to do. But if we want a more long-term solution to this, I think we need to involve the ethics researchers and have a more first principles line of attack to these problems.
That does make sense. Your research is fascinating. Right? And it's fascinating because it was successful. You had a question, but you've come up with something and said, like, this actually does work. And I think that's, for a lot of people, you're right, for your average advertising agency, they're going to look at this and go, fantastic, this is great news. I can do what I do, but better. But I think this is going to scare a lot of people as well. There's, a lot of people will rightly be very concerned that this isn't used in they are in election cycle in the US right now. That's a space where everyone is hyper focused on where is AI being used? Is it being used ethically, morally, etc.? And this is a kind of technology where, as you were talking, I've been thinking about if I phone up a company or a political party or something to talk to them, the person on the human being on the other end of the line is trying to persuade me of something. No matter who I phone, they're there for a reason. Someone's paying them to do something. There is a level of persuasion for sure. Even if they're there just to answer questions, they are still trying to persuade me to accept their answers as valid. So, there's always persuasion. And we, as humans, we're used to that. That's just interaction. If that person, the agent on the other side, is now going to be an LLM, and Ganesh, I agree with you. It's going to happen very soon. It's already happening, but it's going to happen. It's going to accelerate. I think it's really fascinating to think about the level of persuasion. I mean, this isn't binary. It's not on or off. It's you're showing that if you really, if you optimize for persuasion, you can take it a long way. And I think as soon as, now you've proved that, lots of people are going to go, right, okay, I want maximum persuasion, please, because I really want to sell all the widgets, or I want everyone to vote for me, or whatever outcome they're after. And I can really see that you're right, and it's not a data science problem. It's not. It's data scientists. It's the emphasis on the scientists are showing the capability, and that's exactly what you've done. I think it's going to be super fascinating to see how. We're seeing this all the time in the kind of responsible AI space about how this kind of technology can be I don't say mitigated, just managed well without draconian laws coming into place to just hard ban. And you're seeing again in the US and California a lot of reactions to the legislation. That there's a lot of kickback there. So I'm just I suppose I'm probably talking out loud, but from your point of view, as researchers, as scientists, how far do you feel your responsibility goes before you kind of have to hand over to someone else to say, okay, you need to think about this bit too?
I have one point of it, right? So to really govern certain things, something, you need to fully understand it first. What is it fully capable of? So in a way, why like the way we chose a synthetic audience is that we could have had this persuasion agent go full blown, right? Take away those fact checks, take away all the filters, let it hallucinate all the way just to persuade. Like the only objective for it is to persuade the user, right? If you do that, then you know really what the LLMs are capable of, how persuasive the LLMs can be. Once you're aware of it, then you can actually put a right governance around it. So right now we don't know, just because we put some fact checks and there are certain boundaries that we have set. It's not going beyond a particular capability, persuasion capability to make a sell, right? But what if there no check at all and someone is going to do it? So we should probably simulate it, see what is it capable of, and then be aware of like what the governance that should be. That is something that we should definitely do. Understanding the full disastrous capability might actually help us govern it better.
And you guys have come up with a framework to be able to run that experiment. So that's I agree with you. It would be a scary but good experiment.
Yeah, as long as it's in the lab.
Yeah.
Yes.
Keep it in the
Yes.
lab, please.
Only with the synthetic audience, no humans.
So, Christian, I want to add something to this. Okay. See, the earlier version of how, one of the ways we wanted to kind of, I would say, make this important for businesses was not even to deploy an, okay, almost have an LLM monitor sales agents called, right? And in real time, sort of detect what resistance a person is showing or how you are coming across to a customer, and almost sort of be a support. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make over here is that an AI assisted human also can be very dangerously persuasive, right? And or effectively persuasive. I don't want to say. So these technologies are incredibly hard to govern in some sense. And if we try to over govern them, you are actually the people who have a bad intention will anyways do what they want, correct? But we as a society will understand them lesser and will not understand what works, what doesn't. Okay. Fortunately, today, I mean, unless you're watching a sci-fi movie, none of the AI has a agency in terms of it doesn't have a will of its own. It can't act on its own unless a human is prompts it to do. So if something goes wrong and you're doing deployments, you have the ability to pull it off, correct? So I'm in favor of trying things out. And generally my experience has been, because there's been so much conversation about this. And Hollywood has done its part to scare us, I think, for 30, 40 years in advance. So it's okay to have faith that there are a lot of sufficient eyeballs on this problem that we don't have a runaway train doing something.
Okay, I just want to sort of turn the topic to the future. So where are you going next? Now you've got this far. What have you got your sights on?
So we did try to introduce something resembling a self-evaluation for these user agents, to remember the conversations, to remember what was the impact that it made, and then show it in the next conversations. We want to build upon it. And this capability, we only gave it to the user agents. Now, what happens if the persuasion agent also has that self-evolving nature? Where can it go? How can it evolve? Can it actually invent new persuasion strategies? And can the resistance strategies be a bit more different so that the questions are logical? The way that it analyzes the information given to it is different. So I want to go in that self-evolution mode. How perspective changes are evolving slowly, and like how resistance strategies are evolving slowly. I wanted to study that. That's basically where I wanted to go. Plus, as I said, like I actually want to pull the plugs out and just confine the framework in a simulated environment. See what is the level of persuasion it can actually do.
I mean, I agree with Ganesh. Some persuasion strategies probably need us to make good external knowledge. For example, humans are very good at telling personal stories or appeals to authority. These are two persuasion tactics they do very often. Now, appeal to authority has to be fact-based and contemporary. So some sort of a news tracking mechanism which gives it anecdotes and fills up a knowledge base so that the LLM can use it. And personal stories, humor that, look, I did this, that form, how do we bring into play as a persuasion trick is important within this problem. But some of the components of this research are very useful for a lot of my other work also. So me and Ganesh, we haven't published this work, but we almost had like some 8 or 9 agents, and we made them script writers and video generators, and we give them tool calling abilities and hook them up to a lot of Gen AI tools that are, or API services are available, and we almost simulated an entire marketing ops end to end. Okay. This is interesting for us, and this is interesting for TCS business, and we're doing a lot of experiments. And when you're getting a lot of these agents or human plus agents ideating together, okay, you want them to not be very sort of mechanistic, like you don't want it to be like workflow automation, like do this, do that. The more human like you do, we believe it will bring out creativity a lot more. Because if you think of how we operate, it is our arguments and our disagreements which actually lead to fusion of ideas. So I think this behavioral change, similar behavioral change aspect, we want to put in sort of ideation tools and a whole bunch of other things, marketing, and we believe that is where we'll see a lot of value in. I also think that if augmentation of AI with humans, correct? Like there's a lot of talk of co-pilots, but I'd done one study long back where we had translations and we were asking humans to sort of edit them to get a higher quality translation. A lot of our volunteers said that, look, just give me the original sentence and translate. Translating what the AI has made is painful. So this sort of a cooperation between the human AI, especially in creative tasks, how it's going to work is of interest to us. So for example, in the sales sort of thing, if you are right now only sort of an agent, AI agent just talking to a human being, but it's the AI agent plus human talking. How do I make that conversation seem seamless? Who comes in where, who goes where, or when if I'm trying to create something, maybe editing videos, creating graphics, designing reels, where does something come in, go out? This is sort of the broad landscape of problems that are interest to us. Grounding personalities is one of the most important problems for us.
Oh yes, that we forgot. Personality. So the LLMs are very hard to make them stick to a personality for a long time. That's why this 20 conversation. Yes.
Okay.
Once you figure that out, probably the synthetic audience and all this use cases might actually pop up, and it's a beautiful use case.
So let me just scratch on the surface. What do you actually mean, right? So the 20 personas, you are limited because the LLMs kept on switching?
No. So we limited the conversations to 20, 20 dialogues, because after a certain point in time, the LLMs cannot maintain the personality that we gave it.
I see. Okay.
So it goes back to a normal assistant mode kind of.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
So is that a context window problem, that it's just kind of, that's information it's forgotten?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's because two things. You have the lost in the middle problem. So even if context window really becomes large, it doesn't necessarily really look at the whole. That is one issue. The second thing is that we need to even really think that does the sort of internal understanding of LLM have a notion of a personality, or are these just loose individual facts which it is unable to connect together? So in some sense, all our ethics worries can wait for a while, because we still need to, we still need to fix a bunch of other problems, right?
Within
But,
quotes, problems.
yeah. So this to us is like, the core problem, that can we ground the personalities, and can we make it stick to one? Because a lot of these other applications sort of hinge on that.
Thank you.
Last thing we like to do on the podcast is a lightning round. So these are short questions, short answers. Don't think too hard about it. We just get an idea on some topics kind of outside of your research. So maybe Arijit, if you want to ask the first one.
Sure. And as Christian said, no correct answers, no incorrect answers as well. So your opinions.
Allowed to hallucinate.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. The first one is, what are your thoughts on transformers? Can transformers get us to AGI?
No.
I think that's going to be a common answer. Okay, next one. Should we keep training larger foundation models?
Yes.
No.
Ooh.
Yes, why not? Sorry. Okay. I mean, researchers are allowed to disagree. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this gives you a glimpse of how our internal conversations are. So.
Yeah.
One of the things that everyone in this space needs to do is follow other people. So just curious as to if you could suggest one person, one company, whatever it is that someone should follow because you find it really valuable, who would you suggest?
So I would go with Anthropic and OpenAI.
Yes.
Cool. And Shirish, who would you?
Yeah, I definitely think their blogs are very interesting. I mean, Anthropic's papers in particular are big. Some of the things that they've considered are pretty fantastic. There's one person is almost unfair, because there's so many stalwarts in the field of AI. But I find Andrew Ng's sort of a letter that he runs, or once in a while, when it comes out and sort of almost reflects on what's going on, I find it pretty profound. That sort of very balanced, I think.
Yeah.
Probably in a very short time, we'll follow you guys too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. What is the percentage chance? What percentage you will put at for an AI apocalypse?
I don't believe in it.
So you're saying 0?
Yeah. I don't believe in it.
Okay. Shirish?
My personal opinion. Yeah.
Let's define this apocalypse. Okay. I think these apocalypse, Terminator or Matrix style, is too melodramatic. Okay. So something like that happening requires you breakthroughs in the battery space, energy space, so many other things apart from it. Okay, AI might help them. However, other factors like fake information causing apocalypse, or not necessarily job loss, but constant skill shift pressure. Okay, these have very secondary effects, and these are something I think a conversation should start. It has started, but we need to get really earnest about it. And it has a lot of difficult secondary effects, right? Like, for example, if skill demands are gonna shift so rapidly, what should education be like, right? Mm-hmm. Especially higher education, which is much more skills training. So these are questions I think we should address. And the disruption over there, I think, is going to happen. It's a high percentage. Matrix style disruption, I think, will happen if we really have some very devious and very powerful minds orchestrating it over decades. I don't see it happening.
So 0 for you as well.
Unless someone intentionally does it.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants to do that.
I mean, I think the chances are. Even if people are trying something, they get caught. So I don't see it happening.
It's not very clever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, last lightning question, and this one's very much for the data scientists and the geeks here. So just from the work you've done, which model, technique, language, tool are you really excited about, and you kind of discovered, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. I wish more people knew about this.
From a engineering perspective, I really found that LangGraph was very useful to us. Before LangGraph, we were trying to do everything programmatically, and LangGraph and LangChain actually made our work easier, accelerated, and we were able to do experiments much faster. That's one thing that I would like to.
Suresh, what would you recommend?
I'm very excited about things like DSPy. I think Microsoft came with some which is so we have this alignment problem. So the LLM is not necessarily behaving the way we want. So you give it a few instructions, few rewards, and you train it. Now that was okay for a single LLM, but what we are today writing is, if you think of this as a natural language programming, it's much more important we start treating it also like a program. So this entire space called LLM programming is emerging. Okay, so we really make these compound systems, which I call one LLM 4 times, and one LLM does something called something else. A tool is called so and so. Now, when I want to align a compound system, correct, and I'm just giving you feedback, yes, no, and demonstration, which model should get tuned, how, and things like that, and what should get aligned. I think these frameworks, MBS5, Samo, and all these will eventually get there. And I think one should keep an eye out on that, because that will allow you to do even more sort of fascinating things. Because you will have something that works out of the box that will come from these foundational models. Okay. And you will give them an external memory, long-term memory, which is like RAGs and all. But sometimes you will want to have them change fundamentally, and you won't want the LLM to change. You want your entire compound system to change, and you have some custom sort of feedback on how things have behaved. So to fine-tune such systems is where I think you will really have your uniqueness versus what everybody else is doing. So these frameworks, I mean, I'm reading the up on them and having my team check it out.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I really want to thank both of you for joining us today. Shirish, Ganesh, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and getting to know behind the scenes, right? What happened with the paper, your thoughts, processes around it, things that could not be encapsulated in the written word. It has been absolutely amazing. Thank you both for your time.
Yeah, I want to second that. You guys are amazing. Love it.
It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to someone kind of be your first recording or whatever. And
Yeah.
Good luck. This is fun. Thanks for doing this for the community.
It's a pleasure.
Same here. Thanks for inviting. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
We love hosting this podcast, and if you've loved it too, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends about it too. Where else are you going to learn about the world's ugliest lemur and what's new with AI?
Thanks for listening, and join us next time on the IIAI podcast.